It is the third week of a war that was never supposed to last this long. The bombs are still falling on Iran. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow corridor through which one-fifth of the world's oil passes every single day, is mined, threatened, and barely open. The price of a gallon of gasoline in the United States has surged from $2.94 to $3.72 in a single month. And Donald Trump, the 47th president of the United States, is playing golf in Florida. This is not a metaphor. This is not political commentary. This is the documented reality of the third week of Operation Epic Fury, the American military campaign against Iran that Trump once declared already won and very complete. The war is neither, and the decisions now sitting on the president's desk could determine not just the outcome of this conflict, but the trajectory of his entire presidency, the price of energy across the Western world, and the military posture of the United States in the most volatile region on Earth. History has a habit of consuming presidencies that underestimate. Lyndon Johnson thought Vietnam was manageable. George W. Bush thought Iraq would be quick. Barack Obama thought Libya would be contained. Every one of them was wrong. Every one of them watched a conflict expand beyond the boundaries they had drawn in their own mind. And right now, in real time, Donald Trump is staring at the same lesson with the same dangerous temptation to look away. What happens in the next few weeks will not just be news, it will be history. And it starts here. Let's establish exactly what we know from verified sources, from named officials, and from documented events that are unfolding as you watch it. The operation is officially called Operation Epic Fury. That name comes directly from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who used it in a formal statement when the administration announced that Trump's planned trip to China, scheduled for early April, was being postponed by a full month. The reason given: the president's duties as commander-in-chief demanded he remain focused on the Iran campaign. That delay is itself a signal. Diplomatic trips to China are not canceled lightly. They require months of preparation, coordination between State Departments, careful messaging to markets and allies. Bilateral meetings between American and Chinese leadership carry implications for trade policy, Taiwan, technology restrictions, and the entire architecture of 21st century great power competition. When a trip of that magnitude gets pushed back, it means the situation on the ground is serious enough to override the entire diplomatic calendar, and serious enough that the administration does not want the president photographed shaking hands in Beijing while American aircraft are still striking targets in Tehran. The numbers make the situation even harder to ignore. Approximately 20% of the world's oil supply transits through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. Iran has been deploying mine-laying ships to threaten that passage. The United States has been actively destroying those ships, but Trump himself acknowledged on Monday that the threat is not neutralized. All it takes is one, he said: a single successful mine, a single successful attack on a tanker, and the energy markets don't just spike, they convulse. Insurance underwriters pull coverage, shipping companies reroute, refineries begin drawing down reserve, and within days, the price shock hit every gas station in America. Beyond the strait, the Pentagon has ordered a Marine amphibious unit comprising 5,000 soldiers and sailors to relocate from Japan to the Middle East. That movement was first reported by us media on Friday. It is not a defensive posture. A Marine amphibious unit is a force designed to project power to go ashore, to take and hold territory, to operate in hostile coastal environment. Its deployment to the region signals that ground options are being kept firmly on the table, even if no one in the White House will say it out loud. To understand why this moment is so dangerous, you need to understand the geography and the economics of what is actually at stake, and why the Strait of Hormuz has been called, by military strategists, the most important 21 miles of water on the planet. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. At its narrowest point, it is approximately 21 miles wide. Through that 21-mile channel, roughly 17 to 21 million barrels of oil move every single day. That oil flows to Japan, South Korea, China, India, and Europe. It feeds refineries that produce the gasoline in your car, the jet fuel in the planes crossing above your city, and the heating oil warming homes across the northern hemisphere every winter. The strait is not just a shipping lane. It is a choke point, a single geographic bottleneck through which the energy lifeblood of the global economy passes. Military planners have war-gamed its closure for decades. The conclusion is always the same: even a partial, temporary disruption of Hormuz traffic creates an energy shock large enough to push major economies into recession. Iran has known this for decades. The threat to close or disrupt the strait is Iran's most powerful non-nuclear card, and they have never been shy about playing it. When that strait is threatened, the entire global energy supply chain goes into slow-motion shock. Tanker insurance rates spike within hours. Shipping companies begin rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, a detour that adds 2 to 3 weeks to delivery times and dramatically increases fuel costs for the voyage itself. Oil futures traders price in risk premiums that cascade within days down to every gas station, every grocery store distribution center, every airline booking system. The consumer pays, always, and they pay fast. Trump built a significant portion of his political brand on energy prices. He celebrated publicly when gas prices dropped. He treated low prices at the pump as a personal achievement, a direct, tangible measure that he was delivering on his economic promise. In the early months of the second term, when prices were lower, he pointed to them as proof that his agenda was working. Now, in the span of a single month, gasoline has gone from $2.94 to $3.72 per gallon, a 27% increase that erases months of political messaging in a single tank of gas. The story quickly became more complicated when Trump turned to the international community for help. Over the weekend, Trump posted on Truth Social calling for a coalition of nations, specifically naming China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom to send ships to help patrol and protect the Strait of Hormuz. The logic was sound on paper. If the strait is a global resource used by all, its protection should be a global responsibility shared by all. Trump framed it as collective security, the kind of multilateral burden sharing that American presidents have championed for decades. The response from the international community was swift, and it was not what the White House wanted. Japan declined. Australia declined. Most European nations signaled clearly that they were not willing to be drawn into an active military theater alongside American forces. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking on Monday, was direct. "We will not be drawn into the wider war," he added, with careful diplomatic precision, that he was open to a viable collective plan to address the situation, which is the language diplomats use when they want to decline without using the word no. That rejection leaves Trump navigating a strategic landscape with very few comfortable exits. He can commit American naval power alone to securing the strait, absorbing all the risks and all the costs. He can declare a limited victory, pull back, and watch Iran reconstitute its threat capabilities within weeks or months. Or he can escalate using those 5,000 Marines to put American boots on Iranian soil, near Iranian oil terminals, or inside the nuclear infrastructure the operation was partly designed to dismantle. Every single option carries a cost. There is no clean path. There is no version of this that ends without someone paying a price. This is the defining characteristic of wars that spiral beyond their original intent. They do not announce their escalation. They creep. They expand through a sequence of small decisions, each one defensible on its own narrow term, that together build a commitment too large and too visible to walk away from without catastrophic loss faced domestically, internationally, and historically. Before we get to the three scenarios that define what comes next, and one of them involves a move that would fundamentally and permanently alter the shape of this conflict and America's role in the Middle East, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss coverage like this. This is the story that is going to dominate the next several months of global politics. Now here is where it gets truly serious. Let's walk through the escalation timeline as it has actually unfolded, day by day, decision by decision, from the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury to where we stand right now. In the opening days of the operation, the administration projected total confidence. Trump declared the war already won. White House officials briefed reporters on the scale of the destruction inflicted on Iranian military infrastructure, radar installations, missile batteries, command and control facilities, naval assets. The message was controlled, the tone was triumphant, and the operation appeared to be delivering measurable results on the aggressive timeline the president had promised his support. By the end of week 2, the tone began to shift in ways that were subtle but unmistakable to anyone watching close. Iran had not collapsed. Its leadership remained intact. Its mine-laying operations in the Strait of Hormuz had not stopped. Oil prices had not stabilized. The narrative of swift, decisive, clean victory was running headlong into the reality of a resilient adversary operating on home territory with a clear and patient strategic objective to make the war economically and politically painful for the United States and its allies for as long as it takes. On Friday of the second week, the Pentagon quietly ordered the Marine Amphibious Unit from Japan toward the Middle East. The White House did not announce. The move was reported by American media and confirmed by defense sources. That silence was itself a message. This was not a development the administration wanted to frame public, because the moment they frame it, they own every consequence that follows from it. Over the weekend, Trump was photographed at his Florida golf resort. Simultaneously, his Truth Social feed ran in two directions at once: extended complaints about Supreme Court rulings he opposed, and a public call for an international naval coalition that within 48 hours would be declined by nearly every nation he named. The coalition post read like a presidential directive delivered on a social media platform, confident in language, thin on prior diplomatic groundwork. On Monday morning, the international rejections began arriving in sequence. Japan, Australia, the United Kingdom. France stayed silent, which in diplomatic language is its own kind of answer. One by one, the allies whose economies depend most directly on Hormuz oil looked at the American request and chose distance over solidarity. Each rejection narrowed Trump's coalition of the willing down incrementally to a coalition of one. Monday afternoon, the White House confirmed the postponement of the China trip. Caroline Leavitt invoked the language of command responsibility and called it a reflection of the president's commitment to the mission's success. The word she used was success, not conclusion, not resolution, not end. The administration was no longer, even implicitly, suggesting this was nearly over. That same Monday afternoon, Trump stood before cameras at the White House for more than an hour. He discussed the war. He also discussed Kennedy Center renovation, White House ballroom construction plan, the upcoming World Cup, the health of a Republican congressman, and a cascade of other subjects entirely unrelated to Operation Epic Fury. Critics called it distraction. Supporters called it normalcy. What it actually represents is a president who understands at a deep instinctive level that if he allows the war to be the only story, the war becomes the defining judgment on his president. So he fills the frame with noise, but the war fills the frame anyway. It always does. That is the lesson every wartime president learns, and most of them learn it too late to change course. Zoom out from the daily briefings and the Truth Social posts and the coalition request, and what you see is a set of consequences already embedding themselves into the global economy, consequences that will not reverse quickly even if the guns go quiet tomorrow. Clifford Young, chair of public affairs and strategic insights at the polling firm Ipsos, has been tracking the political numbers through the arc of this conflict. His analysis is precise and carries no comfort for the White House. Trump's core supporters are holding for now. The erosion is happening at the edges among centrist Republicans and independent voters, the exact demographic that decides midterm elections in competitive districts. These are not ideological opponents of Trump. They are performance voters. They supported him because they believed he would deliver results on the economy. If the economy delivers pain instead, they move. Trump's approval rating currently sits in the low 40% range. That is not a position of strength. It is a position of fragility where a single sustained economic shock, a month of elevated gas prices, an uptick in grocery costs, a visible jump in airline fares can shift enough political math in enough districts to change the composition of Congress. And the midterm elections are 7 months away. The affordability agenda, positioned by Trump and his team as the signature domestic achievement of his second term, is being undermined. American voters consistently and overwhelmingly tell pollsters that cost of living is their dominant concern above immigration, above foreign policy, above every other issue on the list. Prices for housing, groceries, and consumer goods remain stubbornly elevated, even as the headline inflation rate has shown improvement. The Iran war is not existing in a separate lane from domestic economics. It is colliding directly with it, and the collision is happening at the gas pump, where ordinary Americans see the number change every time they fill their tank. Young put it with unusual directness. It just blows up everything. The affordability agenda gets torpedoed from the Republican point of view. That framing torpedoed is not accidental. It captures the speed and the completeness of the damage. A torpedo does not slow a ship. It sinks it. The global dimension amplifies every domestic concern. Asian economies that depend on Hormuz oil, Japan, South Korea, India, China, are watching the strait with intensifying alarm. If shipping through the corridor remains disrupted for additional weeks, their own inflationary pressures mount. European nations that decline to join Trump's coalition are not insulated from the economic consequences of Hormuz instability. They simply chose not to share the military burden, which means they absorb the economic cost, while the United States absorbs both the military and the economic cost. That asymmetry does not build alliances. It builds resentment, and resentment, sustained over time, reshapes the architecture of global partnership in ways that outlast any single administration. There are now 3 scenarios on the table, and each carries a fundamentally different set of consequences for the United States, for the region, and for the global economy. Scenario 1, Trump declares a defined, limited victory. He announces that Iran's military capabilities have been significantly and verifiably degraded, its air defense networks dismantled, its missile arsenals reduced, its naval assets destroyed. He withdraws the bulk of American air power from the theater, frames the operation as a strategic success, and pivots aggressively back to his domestic economic agenda. The risk in this scenario is severe and specific. Iran retains the operational ability to continue threatening the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices remain elevated. American adversaries, particularly China, Russia, and North Korea, observe carefully that a determined regional power can outlast an American air campaign and emerge with its government and its leverage intact. The political damage at home is real but potentially manageable, provided gas prices come down within the window before the midterm. If they don't come down, if the strait stays partially disrupted and oil markets stay tight, this scenario becomes a slow-motion political crisis. Scenario 2, Trump escalates. He commits the United States Navy fully and openly to securing the Strait of Hormuz and deploys the Marine Amphibious Unit to seize or neutralize Iranian oil export infrastructure, the terminals, the loading platforms, and the coastal facilities through which Iran project economic power. This scenario places American forces in direct, sustained proximity to Iranian territory. The risk of casualties rises sharply. The risk of Iranian retaliation against us, bases in the region, against American personnel, against allied infrastructure increases substantially. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, and Houthi forces in Yemen all retain the capacity to open secondary fronts that stretch American military resources and dominate global headlines. For the president, who campaigned explicitly against foreign wars and against the forever war era, this scenario creates a direct and painful contradiction between his promises and his acts. If American soldiers die in significant numbers, the political cost becomes existential for his legislative agenda. Scenario 3, a diplomatic off-ramp emerges before the military situation forces a binary choice. A third-party intermediary, Qatar, has played this role before. Turkey maintains back channels with Iran, and China has its own leverage over Iranian economic decisions. Brokers a ceasefire arrangement in which Iran agrees to halt mine-laying operations and stand down its strait threats in exchange for a cessation of American airstrike and a formal pathway to negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. This scenario resolves the immediate crisis without either side claiming total victory or absorbing total defeat. It is also the hardest scenario to execute because it requires both Trump and the Iranian leadership to accept terms that each side's domestic political audience will immediately characterize as capitulation. In Washington, it means Trump stops short of the complete dismantlement of Iran's military and nuclear capacity that he implied was the goal. In Tehran, it means accepting that American military power imposed real and lasting cost. Neither government finds that narrative easy to sell. Trump has a window, but it is not infinite. 7 months is enough time for gas prices to recover if the strait reopens and the campaign wins down on terms that allow the administration to claim success. American public anger over energy prices is historically fierce and historically short-lived when prices revert. The political damage is real but reversible if the timeline cooperates. The problem is that timelines in war are set by the war, not by the president's political calendar. The Marines are moving across the Pacific toward a theater that has no clean exit. The mines are still in the water of the world's most critical shipping lane. The Allies have declined to share the burden. And the president, the one who promised no more forever war, who said America was already winning, who called the operation very complete, now faces the oldest truth in the history of American foreign policy. Wars do not end when presidents say they are over. They end when the conditions on the ground allow them to end. And right now, those conditions do not exist. The deadline is self-imposed, the consequences are permanent, and the world is watching every move.